We know that 80% of the care of elderlies is done by family members, and we know that the stress level is very high and the depression level is very high. And we often see caregivers succumb to health issues before the person that they are caring for. Everyone has a level of stress. All caregiving is stressful. And to realize that you can't do it all on your own is really important, and I've seen that just really decrease the stress level. I have seen many caregivers in our support group who get outside help, who go on a vacation for a week, or who have their loved ones someplace 4 hours a day, several days a week, and bring in the other family members and have them help. Maybe they mow the lawn or do things, maybe they can't give hands-on care, but there's so many ways to decrease stress. But I think when we talk about burnout, that's really almost like you're at the end and you can't continue doing it. And that's when you need to seek other help also. Well, when people are dealing with too much stress, there are particular signs to watch for. They become very irritable sometimes, and they may be verbally abusive. We have seen people become physically abusive, and that's just a real sign to get help immediately. They become depressed. We see people losing their friendships. They're not socializing in the world like they had been at one time. Their world is getting smaller. They are not sleeping well. They may not fall asleep well at night. They may wake up early, or they may sleep all the time. They may eat poorly, too much and gain a great deal of weight, or they may not eat well and lose a lot of weight. So we see lots of behaviors. They may turn to alcohol, and we have seen that. They may turn to drugs. They may take sleeping pills. They may start smoking again if they hadn't been smoking. They're ignoring their physical condition. They're denying it, actually. They're not going to the doctor for physicals and for different concerns. So we see lots of problems when they're under so much stress. I think people don't stop and ask for help because sometimes they feel, well, mother cared well for me when I was growing up. I shouldn't need any help. Sometimes caregivers think no one else can do it as well as they can. Sometimes there is a financial situation that doesn't allow them to get help outside the home. But if they would only realize that that's what's going to save them and take good care of their loved one by them getting outside help. I like to think of people not being caregivers so much, but rather care managers, so that they can understand that they don't have to give the care 24/7. They can bring people in the home to give care, maybe to help with bathing, or they can have someone go to adult day health where I work. There's many ways that they can get help in the home if they would just use those different options of services out in the community. And there's many ways to find those services. People can go to the Area Agency on Aging, which every city has, and in that agency are people specially trained to work with caregivers. There are people who understand all the services in the community, so they can hook people up with care that they need and help the whole family unit that way. Well, I think there comes a point when it is important to consider moving your loved one out of your home into another setting. And it may be that your health is failing. You can no longer physically lift and transfer your loved one. Maybe your loved one is incontinent, and that's just a line in the sand that you've drawn that you cannot handle. Maybe your personality does not lend to caring for this parent, or maybe there's been some history that makes it hard, and once you're in that role, you find that this is not working well. I've seen many caregivers hurt themselves physically, or they have chronic conditions themselves that make it too difficult for them to give care. I think when a caregiver realizes they're at the end of their rope and they can't give good care anymore, they can't give enough care for their loved one, and they have to move them, we often see care receivers, the family member, not want to leave home, and we all understand that. But I think it's really good for the caregiver to realize that, one, they have to do this. Maybe their doctor has said you have to. Your health is such that you're going to go down if you don't do something. And to realize that when they move their loved one to a facility, adult family home, assisted living, or nursing home, whatever, that they are still the caregiver. They still need to oversee the care and make sure it's good, make sure they can do as much to provide what their loved one would want there. I think we need to remember that we can't make everything perfect for our loved ones. When we have chronic health conditions and we're getting older, we can't turn the clock back 20 years. And mom can't be driving again and doing all the things she did. And it's really hard. And I know from personal experience, caring for my parents, you want to fill in all that social and emotional gap that they have because they've lost their friends, they've lost their spouse, they're not driving, they've lost their social connections. And it's very, very hard. But the caregiver just has to do the best they can and realize they're doing their best and affirm themselves for doing their best. I always talk to caregivers about having a plan, and we sort of call it Plan B, but it's a plan for who would care for their loved one if something happened to them. And I have seen caregivers have a stroke or a heart attack, and 911 comes to the home, and then maybe it's the wife that's had the heart attack, and the husband is there with dementia, and so the responders take the loved one to the ER with them. And maybe the children don't know what mom really wants for dad if something happens to her. So if people start going around and looking at facilities, knowing what level of care their loved one may need, they can get them registered at a facility, have the person assessed at the facility so that if the time comes, and hopefully it doesn't, but if it does, that they have to make a sudden move, maybe the adult children or other family members know, yes, mom had him planned to go to this nursing home or this assisted living facility. And that just helps the family members relax, knowing that there is a plan in place. And when there's not a plan, that puts so much pressure on the family members who are left. And it's not really fair because the person doing the hands-on caregiving is the one who knows best what their loved one needs and would want. So I really tell everybody you have to have a plan for if something happens to you because none of us know our tomorrows. Well, there are many caregiver support groups in our community. The Area Agency on Aging has a list of all of them, and that's a great place to go. And every community has an Area Agency on Aging. We have the Alzheimer's Association that's all over the United States. There's many places that have support groups. There are support groups for Parkinson's. There are support groups for bipolar. There are support groups for dementia. There are many dementia caregiver support groups in our community. And that is so important because caregivers need education. They need to know what the disease is going to be down the road so that they can make plans. And when they understand why their loved one asks them a question 10 times in 2 minutes, they can become more understanding and more compassionate. And when they don't understand, they just become angry and frustrated. Respite stays are wonderful. I have seen them help so many people in our community. And there are different assisted living facilities or nursing homes or even adult family homes that will arrange for a respite stay for someone. Maybe a wife wants to go to a college reunion for 3 days and doesn't want to have the spouse at home. It's not safe and it's hard to bring in care for that long a period. So they do a respite stay. And what I love about that is the family can see how the person does outside the home. And maybe they'll decide to keep that person there if they're already thinking that caregiving is becoming pretty hard for them. So it's a wonderful option, and they can leave and go on vacation knowing their loved one is well cared for. I always like to tell caregivers to think about the time that they get on the airplane and the flight attendant says, make sure you put your own oxygen mask on first before you help those who are dependent on you. And caregivers need to do that, because if they don't, they're not going to be able to run the course of caregiving. And it's not fair to do that to the person they're caring for, because they're not going to get the care they need if the caregiver is not taking care of themselves. And they're going to feel guilty as they see their caregiver stressed. And I hate to see that. The caregiver needs to realize they have done and they're continuing to do their best. And when they are rested and healthy, they can be the spouse, they can be the daughter, they can be the son to their mom. They can take the mom out for lunch and do all kinds of things and become that family member again instead of an exhausted caregiver.